Hello, everyone. Welcome to True North Project. This is Christian. If you are a returning listener, you're probably wondering what the fuck happened. This is my first podcast released in quite a while. Um, and I am absolutely just ashamed to say this podcast was recorded, this conversation was recorded in May of 22. So um, this is just goes to show that I am a work in progress and not the best track record at releasing podcast episodes. I've got a few others that are also quite old that are just been kicking around in the queue. And unfortunately, I just sort of like hit a wall and fell off the wagon with releasing, podcast episodes on a regular interval. That being said, it's a new year. Happy 2024. I've got a producer now. Shout out to Ty Dobbs. Stoked to have him on the team and creating some awesome systems and structures to make sure that this podcast is a regular occurrence for the entire year at least, and hopefully beyond. So expect much more regular weekly episodes. And really excited to just use this platform to explore my own curiosity and do some sense making, drop into dialogos and conversations with visionaries, thought leaders, creatives, and just interesting people, interesting humans, to try to, sort of tease out their signal and arrive at some sort of coherence where we can hopefully discover some new novel wisdom together, and some ancient wisdom as well, obviously. But besides sense making, also doing some soul searching myself in this crazy fucking time to be a human. So if you're, finding yourself overwhelmed with everything that's happening in the world, with AI, with, the poly crisis, meta crisis, whatever you want to call it, unfolding, we're trying to curate and cultivate some conversations that can help orient us towards, hopefully a more beautiful world and help us find our, unique true north, because it's kind of an individual project. But not that we can't open source it a bit and help spread the love and share with everyone. So any of these conversations they're first and foremost for my own selfish benefit. These are all people I want to talk to, and that I just enjoy, the experience of being able to drop in with. And I like to publish it and open source any wisdom that comes from it so that it can be beneficial to anyone else. So with that being said, I don't want to ramble anymore about the podcast and my insufficiencies as a podcaster, even though they are numerous. I will introduce this guest, which is my good friend, James Sirls. He is the founder of one of the, if not the coolest float center I've ever been to in the world, which is called Float State. It's in Corona, California, which is just like an hour out of LA. If you're ever in Southern California and you want to check out an incredible facility, highly recommend it. But when I went to Float State, it made an impact on me in the sense that it was the most inspiring float center I'd been to, and it made an impact on how my design process went with designing True North Float in St. George. We used the same float tanks, kind of copied a lot of the same formula. And James is still just doing an amazing job out there and crushing it. So he's also just a dear friend and a fellow float nut, float enthusiast, whatever you want to call us. So I had a really fun time, as I always do whenever I drop in with James. And I am apologizing once again, James, for not releasing this episode almost 2 years ago when I should have. So without further ado, enjoy this episode with James Sirls.
So, James, thanks for doing this, and thank you for building Float State. So, this place, why don't you? I want to hear. I'm curious about like why you got into floating, and then what kind of that journey that emerged, that led to this place, and why Float State's a thing.
Yeah. All right. So getting into floating, I'm sure I had heard about floating for a couple reasons, but mostly I think Joe Rogan at first, like most people, I think. And I just heard it was a great thing for meditation, for just relaxation, but mostly meditation. I was really trying to get into meditation. So a little over 6 years ago, got sober. I was addicted to painkillers for like 10 years.
Wow.
Hooked on painkillers, drinking too much, all of that kind of stuff. So some of the things I started to try to figure out, and I knew it was not a good thing. It was problematic for family, for my job, everything. Was like, meditation can help, all that kind of stuff. So I started to look into different types of meditation, all of that. And then finally, when I just completely actually was able to just stop taking everything and really get sober, I got to go try floating for the first time. I was looking for different things to relax and really to start meeting my mind, trying to figure out what the heck was going on, why that all happened in the first place, all of that, and just get better. And I floated my first time, and it wasn't anything that great, but I was just kind of desperate. Definitely wanted to give it another try. And by the second or third time, I remember just driving home and feeling the steering wheel underneath my fingers and just feeling really good. So I started taking people, sending people, people with all kinds of issues, from same thing with like substance abuse stuff, trouble sleeping, back pain, stress, insomnia, all of those kind of things. And just people loved it. Like they would either on the way home just be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Or, call me a week later, just be like, dude, my back doesn't hurt. All kinds of stuff started happening. So, I came from a construction background and basically got into, I think, again, like most people, I'm like, damn, I want to do this. Like, this is what I want to do. I want to, not just be taking people and sending people to another place. Like, I want to make this more available, because it was a mission to take people out to Costa Mesa or Pasadena to go float from out here.
Yeah. Because you grew up around Corona?
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was nothing like Float State in Corona
No.
until you brought it here.
Yeah, no.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't think, really the only places that we had around here there were other float places we could go float, but.
I see.
Yeah. So, being in a construction background helped a lot with building this place out.
Definitely. It's such everyone who thinks, I'll just throw some float tanks in and have a business. It's like, there's a hairy learning curve and a process and a lot that goes into making it, to create the experience of nothing.
Yeah.
Takes a lot.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of effort.
Yeah, I wish that crossed my mind, the float tank just now. I wish it was like an easy way to where I've seen all these people just, we're getting ready to start our build out and all that stuff. I know they do consulting and stuff like that, but just to be able to be like, hey, like, watch out for that, and just to easily be able to transmit that to somebody else. Because
there's some, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Mark, Mark Less, is extremely helpful. In this.
Incredibly helpful guy. Yeah. And just like jumping out of his chair to help people. It seems like, he's definitely answered so many questions and helped me avoid some headaches. It's major, like probably just tens of thousands of dollars worth of what you would call consulting work or something that he's just given, as like a good-hearted, pay it forward type of person. And that seems to be the common thread throughout the float industry that I've noticed, is it's like there's for the most part, I've heard a couple of stories about people. I haven't come across any in person, where I've had anyone try to do anything mega competitive or cutthroat or anything like that. Yeah. Well, that's not true. I had one kind of so there was a shop in St. George before we opened. They'd been closed for several years, but they'd opened up for like a couple years, and maybe a year or two, just like a couple float pods and a massage business. And they weren't in business anymore, and I was trying to reach out to the owners because I wanted to, meet them, take them to lunch, hear their story, see what worked, what didn't work, And she wasn't very receptive. She was like, it was like from the first interaction when I finally got a hold of her, because it's a small town, and I met someone who knew her. And I got her number, and I reached out to her, and she was just like, yeah, I have this list of customers, and I have this and that, and it's like $10,000 or $20,000 if you want to meet or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, Weird. That's the first time that's happened.
Yeah.
Because normally it's just like, anything you need, man, like call me anytime or whatever, you know?
I had one of the same type of experiences, and really it was cool, like a reflection of like, how do I want to be? How do I not want to be? And really the whole paying it forward and just, just trying to be useful. That's how this whole place is built, really, just trying to be useful, especially if it's other people. Even if you're, in the next city over, a couple cities over, really, I've been able to just go meet with people and just be like, hey, I'm not going to set a proximity of where I'm going to be useful, really. It's just I've gotten to help some people out with some cool stuff, at least just local. So
yeah, totally. So I want to hear a little bit about so obviously part of your why is your own personal journey, your float experience, which helped you. So if I'm correct, you're saying you kind of used floating as a catalyst to help you get through that hump, get over that hump when you were battling addiction with pain pills and stuff, right? Or was it kind of after all that?
Kind of after the hump, the actual the gnarly withdrawal and all stuff, that. Yeah, the detoxing. I was over that hump, so I didn't actually have like the John Lennon story, I guess. Like he was one of the guys that supposedly used it to kick heroin or whatever. No, so I was over the hump for sure, but I was definitely in that mindset of like, I got to do something different. And I really started, really taking a look at myself instead of pointing fingers everywhere else and, and doing that in a float tank.
Gotcha.
Just inhaling love, exhaling gratitude, starting all those kind of practices in a float tank is just game changer. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. So what was you said you mentioned to be useful, and I've heard you just say that, like, be of service. I've heard you mention that to me in the past. Like, how does this, what's the greater why is to, because sure, you can turn it into, a livelihood. You can turn it into a profitable business, I guess. But it takes a lot of sacrifice, takes a lot of work. Anytime you're going to be the guy betting it all, risking it, putting in, I don't know how long of hours, but for most entrepreneurs, not just in the float industry, but just entrepreneurship in general, is a huge chunk of your life. Mm-hmm. That's just like you're absorbed by it. So you might as well be doing something that you're passionate about, right? Yeah. And so what's the greater why as far as like go through all the hassle, the work, the financial investment, the risk, and all that kind of stuff to try to bring something like floating and these other awesome modalities that we can talk about too into Corona?
So I just wanted to be able to float all the time.
Yeah, that's you're speaking my language.
Yeah. Now, I mean, really, it's a touchier, tricky thing, a funny, wiggly thing to think about, but just like the spiritual side, the altruistic side of just be useful and serve people. I know it's, but you owe me $20. I get that whole. It's very wiggly, but really, just I'm glad. I guess something kind of shifted in me, because I would say before, I think one of my issues was really like, once I get my island, I'll be happy. My helicopter, my Ferrari, then sure. I'll be happy and all that kind of stuff. And it was, once I get those things, then I can help other people. I need to get to my certain spot, and then I can be useful to others. Something kind of just started to shift when I started floating and all of that, or because I wanted it to shift, because I wanted to start thinking a different way.
Yeah.
And I would say just really going into this, it was, just having that, just be useful, starting my day that way. Really, I just don't want to get too busy. And what I think James needs to be doing, what's so important to James, that I don't miss an opportunity to be useful to somebody else. So that really became a serious practice. I wanted to strengthen that muscle. And, making business decisions and contractors not showing up and, COVID, all of that kind of stuff. For sure, there's that, what's going to happen? But I mean, to be able to just fall back on, like, perhaps this is just what I need to do. Just remember, you're just here to be useful, that kind of thing. It felt like a lot through construction, through the first year of like, are people going to take into this? Like, almost felt like we were being pushed. And, breathing that into this place, doing the construction, everything, the crew, the staff here, people just, they come in the door every day still, and just they feel it when they come in here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, if you've ever experienced any sort of like catharsis or release or ecstatic aha moment or anything in the float tank, like if you've ever had any of those moments, then it kind of makes all the other stuff worth it, because other people are having those moments, right? Yeah. And having those breakthroughs. And like, obviously the float tank's not like a panacea that's a cure-all or a fix-all for all your problems. In fact, you could float, it might be kind of challenging to do this, to maintain like some sort of selfish, sort of like self-maximizing demeanor if you're floating all the time. But I could see it happening. I could see somebody who's just floating all the time and still being the same, because it's not like there's anything magic about the tank itself that's going to make you like a better person. It's like, it's just going to put you in with yourself. And it's like, now you get to come into the awareness of like the introspection and the interoception, where the mind, body, spirit can all come into the room and that's all you're experiencing, because there's nothing from the outside kind of hijacking your experience with the sensory inputs.
Yep.
So, then you kind of have to be like, oh shit, I have some shame here, I have some pain here, I have some grief here, I have like all this other stuff. I'm like a very complex, multidimensional thing, where my mind is in my body and my body is in my spirit. Like, it's all kind of connected. And I get to decide, I guess, do I want to breathe this one out? Do I want to hang on to it,
Yep.
and decide kind of, I see it as like just a place to orient yourself in whichever direction you want to go. When you get out of the tank, what's coming next, and how do you want to orient yourself? And that's why I liked the name True North. It actually precedes floating, not necessarily floating, but it precedes the float center. And it started out more as like a blog project and a travel thing, where I was going to travel and blog and write about things that have helped me find True North. And floating was key. Like, it was right at the top of the list. And I got the idea of True North in a float tank. So, but then it evolved into like this float center, to where it can like actually help other people do that as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, just on that point that you're making, I think having that space, that opportunity, it makes the hardships, the stress, the COVID, everything else that you have to go through as an entrepreneur, it makes it kind of worth it.
Yep, totally.
Yeah. So what's since we're on the topic of entrepreneurship, I think there's going to be some people who are, I'm interested in this myself. So like, what would you consider? So you said you were in a construction background before. Were you running your own business? Were you working for someone else?
I worked for a few different construction companies. Started off in plumbing, went to a couple different companies that did, curtain wall, like the exterior skin of buildings out in Vegas, the big Cosmopolitan, City Center, those jobs.
Cool.
And then general contractor. I started way back when I was a kid at my dad's insulation company. We did all the stuff nobody liked to touch, the fiberglass insulation. That got into fire stopping. So I ended up going back into business with him, and just as an estimator and a project manager, and that's where I left that company actually, when he ended up selling it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So was like the shift? Was there any particular like experience or shift or breakthrough or anything that made you want to, say, hey, I could be comfortable. I could go work for somebody. I could general contract for this company or whatever, and I could, make a good living. But I'm going to go and do this instead, and it's going to be a totally new out of left field, new experiences. I'm going to learn everything all the time. Like, I'm not going to know what the fuck I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what made you want to make that shift into like now just pure creation mode?
Man, I think I really started to become aware of, like, again, how much, I was like, oh, what's the next project? All these things, this big thing, like being in a float tank, the stress that came with, okay, great, I sold a big job. What's the next big job? Okay,
right.
Now I've used all these funds. Now I need to get on to the next big thing, and just trying to move to the next constantly. So I was definitely not passionate, I wouldn't say, about construction or anything. It's I liked working on big projects and just saying, hey, we just did Wilshire Grand out in LA or whatever. Yeah. But definitely wasn't passionate about it. What I started to realize pretty quickly, and I stayed with the company for another 2 years after I started this place.
Okay.
What I started to realize, though, is what I'm passionate about is being present in here, being present with other people and seeing that transformation happen.
Yeah.
Definitely more passionate. I knew it wasn't going to be anywhere near the kind of money I was making doing that, but
right.
Yeah, it was kind of a scary jump, but just to be able to put 100% of my energy into this place instead of, half and half.
Dude, it shows.
Yeah.
I'm drinking fucking draft kombucha right now. We're sitting in like a beautiful yoga Zen space what do you call this room?
The Flow Studio.
The Flow Studio. Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And like I said this before we were rolling, but like when I was looking at doing my research and I was traveling to float centers and doing all the R&D and I pretty much like dialed in on the tanks I wanted, and I wasn't super excited about them, but I was kind of like, it seems like the best option for the price that I can afford. And right before I kind of moved in that direction, this guy found my podcast, this guy Daniel Mallet, reached out to me, and he's like, hey, have you heard of, I want to talk to you and meet you or whatever, I'm interested in what you're doing. So we chatted, and he's like, have you heard of Apex Flow Technologies? And I'm like, no, never. So got on my radar, and I was like, holy shit, these are beautiful, and all the images they're using are from your space.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got to go to Float State and check this out in person. And so when I got here, the tanks were the main reason I came, and the float was incredible. And immediately, like halfway through the float, I was like, yes, like fucking found them. Yes, like this is so nice. Like finally a tank where I can like stretch out in starfish mode, you know what I mean, and do whatever I want. Like I can. Yesterday I was like doing all kinds of twists, and just whenever I float, not all the time, but sometimes my body wants to move. And when you're in a pod, pods are good for different reasons, and I think you can speak to that. You prefer the pods, right? But you can't, especially a big guy, like you can't really stretch out.
Yeah.
And so it was super nice just to be able to come in, feel no claustrophobia at all, just be able to totally like let go, and it's so spacious and open. Mm-hmm. But then the rest of what you've done, I didn't expect that to leave such a mark. Like down to your business cards, like everything, the attention to detail, the geometry, the symbolism, like the vibe that's resonating out of your brand and out of what you're doing, just to me screams like authenticity. It screams like I have my heart in this, not just like, we'll slap a logo on it and we'll have a model and we'll crank through some money or whatever, some revenue. So yeah, you've done like an incredible, like you can feel the vibe like when you come in here, and I just want to say kudos. I think you're doing it better than anyone in the industry.
Oh, thanks.
I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a cool story actually how I found out about Apex. Well, it was Powerletics with Mark. Because when I was searching for tanks, I was looking all over at all these different ones. And do you know David Wasserman? He's the Oasis tank guy.
I haven't met him.
So it's like Float Tank Association. I think all those guys and everything. He's just like, if you're looking at anything besides my tanks, he's like, you got to call this guy Mark. And that's how I got to meet Mark.
Nice.
So it's just cool stuff. Yeah. I mean, I went down and checked out his tank, and I'm like, I'm not feeling the cave look, but let's do something like this. So
yeah. I don't feel the cave look as much either, but and I don't think he probably wouldn't do it that way again. I think it was probably just like a learning thing that he was going through, experimenting. He's used that space for R&D a lot, but the way that you've nailed it, it really inspired the way that we built ours. We have a slightly different like tile look and a different vibe, and I'd love to, obviously if you guys make it out to Utah, let me know.
Oh yeah, I definitely will.
I'll get you in there.
Yeah, really. I mean, it's kind of crazy how much of stuff I was able to really like take a big jump, but that whole thing I was saying, like almost like being pushed. Mm-hmm. A lot of my contacts, relationships in construction, when I worked for a general contractor, and the friends that I had, the guys that did the tile all throughout here are actually a huge tile company. They do hospitals, hotels, shopping mall, like huge jobs. So they helped me out with a crew of like 7-8 guys at one time, all slapping up tile out here. And I'm like, I want to do these mosaics. They're like, yeah. And just the way people helped out here with all of this was pretty amazing. The electricians, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really attention to details. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm sure you've ran into some problems, right? Like everyone does.
Yeah.
So how long has the building been built? Like how long have you constructed this?
We were finished with construction and open in September of 2018.
Right. So you've got like, 4 years on the business almost, on the building.
Yeah.
So with those miles, how's the salt how's it held up to the beating?
Pretty good. I mean, did you float in 3 or 2 yesterday?
I floated in
space or water?
Water. Yeah.
Water. So water, you can see in there, we put up, starting to put up some paneling. They're Altro paneling. It's like almost like an FRP, but a better product. Tried a little area of that, because what I've found myself doing now is I've extended out, taken our tile out farther.
Yeah.
With the that's one of those things you can never really plan for. No. But the epoxy paint that we used held up really well for a couple of years, and now it's just starting to, like, if we don't see any little bits of salt that sit on there for a couple of days, that it just starts to bubble a little bit, all that. So
it's the weirdest thing. It's like spooky. Yeah. It's like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
I'm like trying to figure out the source. I'm like, how the fuck did this happen?
Right.
It's like really, really spooky and confusing. But I think had to do it all over again. No exposed drywall for me.
Yeah.
Like I just wouldn't have any exposed drywall in my float rooms at all.
Yeah, looking at the cost now, I'm like this paneling actually, it can get up to about $18 a square foot.
Wow.
So when I look at tile costs and where I stopped the tile and everything, I totally should have, like, everything you see in those rooms has all been brought out farther. In tank 3, it's all brought up higher and everything. So that's definitely something. But the cool part is we're fixing it now. So
yeah, it's one of those things. This is why it's nice. Like if anyone's trying to get into the industry and open a place up, like go pick the brain of the people who have been doing it for 5 years or for a couple years, because their buildings are like telling the truth.
Yeah.
Like that's the truth of of what it means to run floats, to deal with the salt and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have to get in a totally new frame of mind when you go into build stuff, when you go to do your build out. And most builders that you work with aren't gonna know.
Yep.
And so you have to be the person that's like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
We have to create this barrier. Like
Yeah.
we have to cover these surfaces. We have to have this waterproof. This has to be slip proof. Like,
Yeah.
it's so like attention to detail is huge.
Dude, not only will they not know, but they'll tell you do not need to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then you end up with wonky shit. Like we've had a lot of, I think we've done for our first crack at our first stab at it, got to give us some credit. I think we did an okay job.
Yeah.
And people have really loved floating there. I've loved floating there. But, it's, so many things that have, the building hasn't aged super well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It just shows the signs of like where you thought you had a good, where you thought you'd created a waterproof barrier, but you haven't or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
So it's technical. That being said, I think it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that's actually like now that we've got it down, or we've done it to the point where I feel confident that I could do it again.
Yeah.
And way better.
Yep.
Then I kind of have that like almost like not quite there yet because I've got this other projects and stuff I want to do, but I can see myself getting excited to take another stab at it and let even more creativity into the process and not necessarily be working with a general who's never had that experience before, but be doing it ourselves.
Yep.
Where we just have like full decision, making, and we have the experience and the know-how to go in and do that. And my partner's got his general's license. I think that's what we're going to try to do.
Nice. Yeah, I ended up being the general out here. And,
Nice.
yeah, thank goodness. It was definitely, there's some frustrating points for sure, but. And then I got really lucky actually over COVID. Like I made lemonade out of lemons just with COVID. So like resloping the epoxy floors was a huge thing that I got done over COVID times when we were closed for about
nice.
a month and a half. Yeah.
So that you can get a better drain.
Yeah, it was important.
You were getting puddles and stuff.
Yeah, my epoxy contractor just, he was one of those guys that's just like, oh yeah, we got this. Yeah, we got it covered. It was not.
Yeah, we use the Tacaron flooring, which is really great for non-slip, but it's porous. Like it holds water. It doesn't just run.
Right.
So it's very non-slip, but you end up with water on the floor, so you need an even steeper slope.
Yep.
And we tried to make that clear, like we need this whole thing to drain, right? And so you don't get as much of a we didn't get as much of a slope as we needed either.
Yeah.
So it's there's like so many things we could talk for hours about all of the little things, the kerf jam corner bead that you should never use in a float room, and like all of the little things about like even light sensors and soundproofing and how you lay it out in the first place, right? Like making sure you have a soundproof corridor, where you don't have a lot of noise happening. Like one thing I've noticed about your layout, and you guys have like 4,000 square feet. So yeah, you got like a huge space. You got tons of stuff going on here, which by the way, shout out Float State. If you're in Southern California, you have to go. It's like, so you've got float therapy, you've got massage body work, you got this yoga space, you got cryo, you've got the salt cave. Am I missing anything?
Did you say Luciolite?
Oh, Luciolite. That's right. Yeah.
Yep. Sauna, cryo, salt cave,
Oh,
massage.
sauna. I didn't say sauna either.
Okay.
Yeah, geez, you got all kinds of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got it all.
Yeah.
You could just come and get lost for a day.
Yep.
It's a really cool space. So yeah, like it's rad that because this is like what I wanted to do. I wanted to go everything.
Yeah.
But I just didn't have the bandwidth, the budget, and I'm like, maybe we'll just, with the space we can get and whatnot, like we'll start kind of smaller.
Sure.
And we'll just do float. And originally it was just going to be float, like 4 float rooms and maybe a massage room.
Yeah.
And then I converted one of the float rooms, decided to do fire and ice instead. So we have the sauna and the cold plunge. Which super glad we did that because that's been that's been key. Yep. Cold water is super key. And I know you guys do the Wim Hof workshops, right? Mm-hmm. So you guys do those like what, once or twice a month?
Once a month, yep.
Okay. And you got, what's his name, the instructor you use?
Miles Lucas, yeah.
I'd like to meet Miles. It'd be sweet.
It's good people, yeah.
Yeah. We use Ryan Bean. He's another Wim Hof guy.
Okay.
And he does it for us once a month as well.
Nice.
But those are so fun. Mm-hmm. Those are like, you're talking about being present with people, like those workshops are always a lot of fun to go to.
Oh yeah.
People who like freeze together.
Yeah.
It creates kind of a cool connection.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, you pick up some good tools with that stuff. Yeah. It's amazing, actually, the tools, if you can just remember to use them, that you learn in those workshops.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Anytime you come across any sort of stress, any sort of physical or just mental stress, your breath is your best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think it pairs so well with floating because you get this really nice, like you said, toolkit that you can bring into the float tank with you to go deeper into that practice.
Loving breathing right now. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So I don't know. How many times have you floated, if you had to estimate? Like how many hours?
I would say around 1,000 times. I mean, just
Wow.
a little more, a little less. I mean, 1,000 floats. Now, some of those I've done, not too many, but like 3-4 hour floats.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, not a lot, but
Yesterday I floated for a couple hours here. That was great.
yeah.
I think I'm, I don't know, maybe like somewhere in the between 200 and 300 range. I don't know. But what I was gonna say is like, so you start out like you said, the first float wasn't too much of a wow factor, right? But here you are, 1,000 floats later, or something like that, right? So my question is how has floating evolved for you, and like your perspective towards it, right? Like maybe at first. Like, what was it like to you in the beginning when you first started doing it? How did you see the tank? Like, was it mainly to relieve pain? Was it mainly to just like get away from the world? Was it mainly like, what was your kind of view of the tank, and like, how do you view it now? Like, how's that evolved, if at all?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I was thinking about that. When I first started to go in, it was this cool thing that nobody had heard of. So I'm just like, yeah, like I float, and it would be something like, oh, what is floating? Oh, let me tell you. So it was just this cool thing that people hadn't heard of. So it was almost like I felt like I had this cool little.
While we're on that
Yeah.
point, tell me what floating is, because I want to hear your description of it. Like I've told so many people.
Yeah. So back then I was pretty much using sort of like, I think Joe Rogan's description was really, really good, where you can go in and peel back layers of an onion. You can get in there, and when you think you're letting go, you're not really letting go yet. Like I thought that was a really good description.
Definitely.
But I never had any psychedelic experience, but I think every time I went to explain it to people, I'd say some people have these natural psychedelic experiences. And I remember telling people it's like meditation on steroids, because the meditation was the thing I got into with like Jack Kornfield was a big time, I was listening to him a lot. And I'm like,
he's a Buddhist teacher.
Yep. Yeah. So I would really just be like, hey, it's great for meditation. People would be like, oh, I can't meditate. And I'd be like, yeah, you can. Like,
Yeah, it's a shortcut for sure. It's a hack.
Yep.
Meditation hack. I actually wrote, back when I was in True North was a baby idea, I wrote a blog post called Float Tanks Meditation on Steroids. I named it the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, so definitely agree with you there. I don't know. For me, it started out as like something for like stress relief, pain relief, that kind of thing. Like, well, it was Joe Rogan as well. So I guess it was more, if I'm remembering and being honest, is probably more along the same lines of curiosity of like, okay, Rogan's been talking about this. So actually how it happened was, my friend who was listening to Rogan, I had never listened to him, told me about float tanks, and we went and tried it. I tried it twice, and it was interesting, and it was like I was relaxed after, but I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna keep paying for this. Like, it's kind of expensive. Like, I don't want to keep paying for it or whatever and keep coming. So I just didn't go for another like year and a half, 2 years, and then I myself kind of got into Rogan's podcast, and this is the same time that Nevada had decriminalized or legalized cannabis recreational. And so I was just starting to like discover what cannabis was like. And then I'm listening to his podcast, and he's like, okay, so float tanks edibles. And I just keep hearing that on his podcast. And I was like, okay, maybe I should give this floating thing one more go. And so I went and took some edibles, and I got in a float tank. And I always hesitate to tell this story, because it's like, I don't want to impress my experience on anyone else.
Sure.
And so I always say go into the float tank with intention, but without any expectations, So, everyone's experience is totally different. But that experience with the edibles, like, turned something on, like, brought me into a new awareness of my body, a new kind of like lit me up in a way that I had like forgotten, I'd lost touch with some fundamental aspect of being a person.
Yep.
And so that I don't need to use edibles every time I float either. So it's not this thing where like I have to do that every time. But this experience, it just like jump started me.
Yep.
Yeah. It was like the defibrillator. It was like, and it was like, here I am, like energetic body, like wide open, and just in an experience that I had no reference point for. I had no explanation for. I had no knowledge of yoga or anything like that, of the subtle body, of chakras, of anything. I had no where to put this experience. I was like, what the fuck just happened? But it felt like, it felt so important. Like it felt like when I got out of that tank, and this is the weirdest experience. So I remember it so clearly. This was in January of 2018. I had this, so I'm on these edibles and doing this Wim Hof breath. I can't leave that out. So I got into Wim Hof around the same time. Thanks again to Joe Rogan. So, take a cold shower before the flow, doing this breathing technique, 3-4 rounds of Wim Hof breath as I'm in the tank and the edibles are hitting. And I just like got into like the vibration of the energy in my nervous system, in my head. And it just like, how you do those breath holds when you're doing that Wim Hof breath and you can feel the buzzing. But then in a float tank, you can really like, it just takes over. And I just remember being in this totally different headspace, if you can call it that. It was more like I was not separate from the sensation in my body. That's just what my awareness was just all of the interoception of my body. And it was like the energy was kind of like naturally, organically kind of moving me. And I'm feeling like my bones sort of popping and like aligning a little bit. And then I get this, as the energy's kind of moving down my spine and aligning me, I get this like strange feeling about my lower energy centers in my hips. And I'm like, like I'm kind of investigating it, like what's going on? Like there's no flow here. There's something wrong here. And I have this like strange, stark realization that there's a metal screw in my left hip. And I, of course I knew this, like I had surgery when I was 12, but I was like, it was this different perspective noticing it for the first time. And it was like this horrific realization, like, what the fuck am I gonna do about that? Like, this is bad, like this is impinging my ability to heal. And so it was, on the one hand, this really like hardcore, intense kind of revelation about the path that I've now got in front of me, which is recovering from this and getting the screw out of my body, which was so daunting to even think about. Like, it seemed so invasive, like violated, And then the other thing, which was like this power that I felt, like this capacity that I had just reclaimed, like almost like I became more sovereign from this experience. And as I'm climbing out of the tank, it was weird, like this energy was almost like making me stand up, like I needed to do some mountain pose. And I was trying to like get out, and I'm like, where even am I? Like I didn't even like remember the float tank. I was in this totally different place. And I'm feeling around, and it feels like the inside of an egg because I'm in like a pod. So it's all concave, right? And I'm like feeling around, I'm like trying to figure it out. And then like I start to lift it open, and I literally feel like I'm coming out of an egg. And I climb out of the egg into the shower, into this like new reality. And I'm like, holy shit. Turn the shower on, and it's like music to my ears, the water hitting the tiles like music. And I'm just like, this is like the new kind of chapter where I get to play the game I want to play. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And create the reality that I want to be a part of. And that was just like a total game changer experience. And yeah, it's some dominoes from there. So I hate to like make that. I think the stories, like for me, it was really powerful, and it's my journey, right? Yeah. And it led to me getting surgery 10 months later, getting that screw out, opening a float center. Like that's just kind of the moment, the catalyst moment. Yeah. But yeah, once again, it's my moment. It's not like it's supposed to happen to other people when you go float. So it's like everyone's journey is totally different.
Yeah, I do have a similar kind of thing. I mean, similar in the sense that, feeling the inside of my body, like being in the float tank, probably my second or third time. And I remember it was an Eckhart Tolle type of thing, like the power of now. Being at least as interested in what's going on inside of you as what's going on outside. And just taking those breaths and like feeling what it feels like inside of my stomach. Mm-hmm. And then I know Duncan Trussell on the Midnight Gospel. He does a good job.
Such a good one.
Yeah, just recently I saw that where he talks about with his mom, like he's talking about feeling what it feels like inside of your fingers, and just like, oh, it's kind of, and you feel it, and it's presence. Yeah. But I mean, for me, it was just really, experiencing presence, being like present, and exactly like it's what I do now that matters most. Like it's, it's what is my intention? Where am I coming from? And that was a big time practice in floating, is just like, where are my motives? All that kind of stuff. And, but yeah, the same kind of thing, really. I mean, the edible thing sounds terrible to me. I never had good experiences with those. So it sounds horrible. But what you're talking about, like feeling that just, and I got it a lot through breath also later on. But just really starting to just feel inside of your body and being present.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, edibles aren't for everyone.
Yeah.
They're not. And at first I thought, this is how naive I was back then, like in my, I was 24 or 25 or whatever. And I'm like, everyone needs this. Everyone needs exactly what I just had, right? And so like I'm dragging people in, my friends, my siblings, I'm dragging people in. I'm like, take these edibles, get in this float tank. And it's like the first time I've done either of those things.
Oh my God.
Which is a terrible idea. So you should definitely know the float tank, and you should definitely know edibles separately and be comfortable on both of those things. But even then, like even if you're comfortable on both of those things, you might have an experience that's like strap in, you might be riding the lightning a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily always like if you're expecting like a relaxing bliss experience, maybe don't take the edibles. You know what I mean? Because you might not have that. The edibles affect people differently. So it's not about necessarily the substance. It's more about like it's really about the breath.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is the most.
Yeah.
I think the breath is the magic, because we have the magic built in, right? Breath is life. It's life force. It's prana.
Yep.
And it's like as soon as you make the switch where you know that experientially, like maybe it's in a tank, maybe it's in a yoga practice, maybe it's a meditation retreat, however you get there where you like really connect with it for the first time and you're like, oh, this is really me. Like this is how I come into presence. This is how I find the center. This is how I come into like my power,
Mm-hmm.
and how I correct course, like how I find true north. Like it's all from in here, right?
Yeah.
Float tank's an amazing place for that, for people who are maybe like somewhat removed from that. Like maybe they've even forgotten that it's there, right? Like as kids, we seem to have it, and then somewhere along the way, it gets a little bit eroded or squished out of us from the culture that we all have to like adapt to.
Totally.
Yeah, the society. You grow up in a sick place, or a sick society, a place where there's, we've kind of raped the mother, the sacred Mother Earth that we're on right now.
Sure.
Like you were talking. It's funny. You bumped into us in the parking lot, right? Well, we drove up to. Do you know Tin Mine Road? It's like it's like an old tin mine or something, out by the lake, kind of.
I've been all over up there. I didn't know it was called Tin Mine Road, but I'm sure I know what you're talking about.
It seems like a bunch of off-roading trails. And there's just tons of garbage. So much garbage.
Yep.
And I was just driving through it like, fuck. It's like, oh, it's heavy.
Yeah.
And I've obviously, it's nothing against this place. We've done it across the planet.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And not just the garbage, but the extractive capitalism and the resource, just basically seeing Earth as resource to be raped and extracted.
Yeah.
Instead of like a living, breathing being that is like we're the fruiting body of, So there's this kind of strange moment that we find ourselves in as a civilization and as individuals, where people are starting to like snap out of it. Like, holy fuck, like look what's going on, And like float tanks can help with that. But really, I think it's more about, I don't know, like everyone comes to it in their own way, So I don't even think that the tank's the magic thing that will make people that way. But I did originally. I thought, if I build a float center and I give people float tanks, then they'll start, like, consciousness will evolve and shift, right? And I think more of what it is it's like the center is more of an attractor of the people who are already on the path, like who are already like, hey, no, I need to spend more time on me. I need to, like, I can't pour from an empty cup. I need to like recharge my own batteries. I need to reconnect with like what I'm curious about, what I want to create in the world, like what I want to spend my time here on Earth doing. And then those people sort of tend to find things like floating or meditation or yoga, like some sort of spiritual reconnection practice that I think is 100% essential, fundamentally essential, if we're going to figure out the bigger picture of how to reconnect to like the planet and how to stop I don't know if stop that is the right word, the right term, but deal with the kind of unfolding sort of meta crisis, or the moment that we're in, the pickle that we're in right now.
Sure.
Sorry, just a long-winded rant about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Definitely. Yeah, I think a big thing with me is just the cool part is I can recognize it in myself. Like a big thing when I got sober was just recognizing how selfish and self-centered I could be. And that's the game changer is like, yep, I want to make sure I'm getting as far away from that as possible. And that gets into the whole of throwing out trash of, who cares if I show up for my appointment or not? All of that kind of stuff is just like, the things we can justify and just, if you had it like me, you would do the same thing, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
That kind of mindset. So, but nobody could do anything about it except for me when I decided I wanted to, just to see like, how am I affecting the people around me? And I just decided I wanted to do something about it. But,
yes. So I've been obsessed with this idea of sovereignty lately, and it's sort of kind of inspired a big part of the inspiration for why I'm doing this van life sort of odyssey. By the way, weird synchronicity, like right where we were parked this morning, the name of the street on that side is called Odyssey Drive.
Oh yeah.
Which is weird. Anyways, so the journey that we're on is kind of just traveling nomadically around North America to meet people, to have conversations that feel like true north, like that orient me hopefully more towards a more sovereign, like in the state of sovereignty, where I can from a place where I can create more authentically, and hopefully, imagine a more beautiful world, a more beautiful future that we both know is possible, that we want to align to, that we want to call in, right, to bring in. So sovereignty, though, to me is like this feeling of first awareness of like, okay, what's happening, what's around me, what is this? Which is a really big question. That's actually, it sounds simple, but the simple ones are the hardest ones to answer. Sure. Like what is like the fundamental question of physics and of all these different, disciplines of yoga and everything else, like of introspection, of inquiry. Mm-hmm. It's like you get down to like the I am and like what is. Mm-hmm. So it's awareness, but it's also autonomy. So it's like the ability to govern yourself, to choose for yourself, right? Like you said just barely, only I could choose that. Like only I could decide to change. Only I could decide to not throw the trash out the window. Mm-hmm. Like no one's gonna make, like you can have a police state or whatever, right? Where there's fines for littering. That's not gonna stop littering. Sure. Right? And when we were driving through the hills, like, and seeing the trash, I was like thinking about the times I've thrown trash out the window as a kid and as a teenager. And I'm like, fuck, like this is, it's like, it's not like I'm putting necessarily like I'm not trying to other the people who do the trash or whatever, because it's us. Yep. It's all of us, and we're all on the same marble flying through infinity, right? Like together. So we're definitely one. Mm-hmm. that much I think I've gotten that far, where I can pretty conclusively say that on a level we're definitely one. But once you get that sort of ability of the awareness and the realization that holy shit, I'm a sovereign agent, like I'm this being that can choose, right? And you can argue about whether whether there's free will or not or whatever, but sure. Whether there is or not, I just had a podcast with a philosopher named Forrest Landry, and he was talking to me about this difference between free will and choice, and how there very much is choice. So whether there's free will or not, there's very much choice. And choice is actually more of this like symbiotic thing, this relational thing, where it's like the choice that you have via your environment, So it's like this relationship. It's not just an I separate from everything else, but this kind of symbiosis, right? Mm-hmm. Like I can choose to, for example, come to float state, but then you have to choose to allow this to happen, or if this is going to occur, and that kind of thing, right? Like there's this sort of environmental, interconnectivity of choice. But when you come back into the frame of like, okay, so now I can choose. I can actually reframe my life. Like I can start to orient myself in different directions depending on what really feels authentic. You get this new kind of capacity to do stuff. You know what I mean? Like it's the difference between somebody who's, I don't know, like extremely talented at something, or maybe like somebody has a ton of resource, mm-hmm. like a ton of like money, just like a huge net worth, but they're doing it, but they're kind of slaves in a way to like the same sort of like game, like the loop that they're stuck in. You know what I mean? Which isn't making them happy. Like they're drinking themselves to death or whatever to stack up more gold. But the gold is like more than they'll ever spend. And they're just still doing that. And it's like, so you don't really have the freedom, but you've got like this potential energy that so we all have that. Like we all have some gift, some worth, something that we have to bring into the world, and it's like reclaiming the ability to like actually get the reins back, and so to speak, to where you can actually bring it in. And to me, like, so there's this Japanese idea of ikigai, which is, you're familiar?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so cool. So like, yeah, finding that, like, I don't want to say like finding it, like getting to some destination, like arriving, but like orienting towards a becoming process where you're evolving, you're becoming something through this kind of creation process, which is always unfolding, and it's like transient. It's always happening. Like you're always getting new cells and changing all the time.
Yep.
So that's kind of like what I'm curious about right now, and what I'm trying to sort of like, what the theme of, at least at this phase, what the theme of this podcast has sort of been like. And I see like floating and all the tools that you're bringing here to your community, and like your whole journey, and is just sort of like a super aligned with all that, and a manifestation of that, and down to the geometry and the flower of life that connects all of us, like that in our businesses too. Like, like I don't know if you noticed, but like the logo on my hat, the North Star, is really just the center of the seed of life.
Yeah, nice.
And it was weird how that sort of emerged when we were trying to design the logo. It's kind of came out of nowhere.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun when you get into those like creative moments where you're like, you realize you're really kind of just a channel for this thing to come in.
Sure.
And you're kind of discovering it, It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel that way, like with this place?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, that feeling, I mean, I describe it as just, I feel it's the sense of being pushed, or like the ground lifting beneath my feet.
Okay.
Like that kind of a feeling of just like, when it's happening, I'm like, okay, I'm making these choices and making these moves, but it was very easy to say, like, it's not me. I don't know what's happening here, but it's not me. Like it still is very easy for me to say that, like,
right.
Especially now when what you see in here now is it's a culmination of like, we've got 17 people on staff here now.
Wow.
So yeah,
man, you guys have a big team.
Yeah, it's a lot
It's a community.
Yeah, exactly. It
It's
really
a tribe.
is. Yeah, and just everybody's different little bits and pieces of perspectives, and just trying things and applying them and seeing what happens. And
Yeah. Do you have anyone that's been with you since the beginning?
Yeah, I've got 2 since the very beginning. They were here for the opening night, just everything. And then a third, at least 3 that she came on shortly after, within a month or 2 after.
Right. But when you, I mean, and you've been doing it for like twice as long as we have, but like when you go through that with people, growing something from like an idea, from just like the ground up, it's kind of special.
Oh yeah.
It's fun.
Oh, totally.
And they get to bring their own creative juices in. And that's something that we're sort of learning as a team, trying to figure out how to bring, and me, like I'm trying to figure this out, how to encourage and stimulate that out of the others, and so that they all feel like that we're co-creating all of this, and that they're bringing it in, instead of some sort of weird hierarchy where it's like, like I just issue commands, and then the commands go down and you guys execute or something.
Right. I'll still tell them that's a terrible idea, but I tell them like, hey, what kind of ideas? What do you guys think? What do you think about this? I really like asking everybody, whoever's here, when I come up with an idea, like, what do you think about this or whatever?
Yeah.
I'll still tell them that's a terrible idea.
It's like, that was dumb. No, but like whoever's idea, the geometric lighting piece there, and all the cool, like, I mean, you can tell that it's taken some time, and it's just sort of evolved and grown, and like those little pieces have kind of come together. But yesterday, after I was in the Zen room as post float, doing some writing, and I wanted to share something in the post float journal that you guys have, and then I realized, like, you guys have like 20 post float journals that are just full, just completely full, page to page, like.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Open to close, just like with art and just beautiful like stories and people's like intentions and people's love for the world. It's just like, it's so, I mean, it's just like kind of this weird physical, I guess, signature of like all of the experiences and memories and transformative, the transformations that have kind of been going on here. Yeah,
it's unbelievable. I mean, when I take time to stop and look at those, I keep thinking, I was just talking about it over the weekend, just something we could do with those, something special, because they're amazing. You sit down and read through the.
Yeah, there's got to be a really cool, a really cool way to something you could do with that.
Yeah, I should show you. Every once in a while, my memories, it comes up. This place, when we first built it, when we opened, probably for the first couple months at least, it was like lit up like a doctor's office in here. You know, the lighting and everything is bright white. You know, walls are all bare. It's so weird to look at what it looked like when we were first operating for the probably first year even, and then just started to bring in little bits and pieces like this will get better. I'm glad I didn't feel I don't really remember feeling too much of like we got to get everything the way it's supposed to be right now. It's just like,
right.
You know, what are we doing here? Just trying to be useful. Like,
do you see? So let me ask you this: what's your vision like for the future with Float State, with life, like whatever? Like, what's on your horizons?
So,
what are you curious about?
I share that same feeling of like, man, I would love to do this one more time, or at least once more. You know, all the things that I did learn, things I could do better. So exploring that idea a little bit. We were supposed to expand to the unit next door for a little while. It was becoming a realistic thing, and then new owners bought out this whole shopping center in December of last year. So they really want to bring in a new national client and tenant. That's a very desirable space. So,
right.
You know, what's meant to be, it will not pass us by. So
yeah, and maybe there's another community somewhere that needs this, you know.
Oh, totally. And that's the big thing when we talk about expanding and going to another place. It's like, I don't want to necessarily go to LA, you know, we can go out there and get a bunch of people. It's like, where's another place around here that needs it? Like, you know, so
totally.
That's for sure the driving force. It'll be a lot easier now that I can show that, hey, this is not something, you know, I can't even tell you how many people thought I was crazy opening this place. You know,
I still might be crazy because I feel like it's probably a similar vibe. I mean, I don't know Corona super well, but obviously to me, it feels like this particular place is just like a beaming out, this like vibe that you don't really find everywhere else. So it's kind of like, I don't know. It's kind of unique, and I think we're kind of very much that way in St. George, where it's like super conservative, small town, which isn't necessarily bad to say people are conservative, but that seems to come with, I mean, I guess the thing I'm really pointing at is the Mormonism. So there's like this, in Utah, there's a bubble. There's a Mormon bubble where it's like we're all part of, or not all, but, you know, a huge percentage of the population is part of the same collective zeitgeist, right?
Yep.
Where instead of popping up like wellness centers where they're just like, you know, there's catharsis happening, there's transformation happening, there's like creativity just spewing out of the post-float journals, you know, and there's stuff actually like that you can feel, that you can resonate with and feel, and that feels good. You know what I mean? Like it's not like hellfire and brimstone. It's like people coming into, I mean, it's not even all about spirituality either. It's coming into health, right?
Yeah.
But I think personally that health embodies spirit, body, mind, you know, so it's like all of it.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to, you know, go on this healing path or this journey of reconnecting to radiant health, there's a spirituality that emerges from that.
Sure.
And it looks different for everybody, and it doesn't have to be ideological. It doesn't have to be part of some discipline or group or tradition or church or anything like that. And that's what the tank's so cool is. It's like an individualized spirituality where it's like you can just go in and have this pocket, this space for yourself to reconnect with what's fundamental to you and what would you call it, you know, true north or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But in St. George and in Utah, you know, instead of opening those places, we're opening just more churches, more temples, things like that for the Mormon Church, right? Which it feels kind of like going against a current, you know what I mean? So we opened it up in a place where I feel like needs it, but it's not necessarily like, I mean, a lot of people would say kind of like, oh yeah, you're kind of crazy. Like that seems like a hard kind of gig to go out at least at first. But I mean, could be, you know, even from a business perspective in hindsight, when it's 2020, it might just be like, holy shit, we had no idea the untapped market, so to speak, of people who were ready for this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I don't know if I could even put a percentage necessarily on the people that come in here for, you know, the light workers and the you know, all the energy, but also, I mean, just the people that come in here for physical impairments, for their physical wellness. God, have you ever heard of Fabry disease?
Fabry.
So
I don't think so.
So this is really, really crazy stuff. This guy came in shortly after we opened, right? And Fabry disease has something where basically you don't sweat. It's hereditary. It's passed on through, this guy got it from his father, had it. And anyways, you can't really sweat. So if you have like a flare up, he would call it, you just cook on the inside, and would lay him out for like weeks. This guy that would come in here. Well, he had heard from a person up in Seattle, hey, you should go float. His specialist down here in Irvine told him like, hey, you should go float. He went and tried it once here, and he's like, why would floating in water do anything for me? And he was sitting in there, and he's like, okay, well, I got to go try it again. Well, by his second time, when he floated, I guess he had a flare-up. It only lasted like 3 days, right? So that happened very quickly into us opening within like a couple months. I didn't really have anybody that could say like, oh, this is amazing for your physical, physical wellness. You're the physical side. I didn't float for that reason.
Right.
I sent several people that they said that it helped their back. It wasn't like a complete night and day difference fixing their back or anything. But, I started to realize how many people floating can help for physical ailments, shoulder issues.
Pain's a huge one.
Totally. Obviously, the fibromyalgia you hear about a lot, any kind of pain things. But seriously, like we've got a ton of people that come in here for chronic pain issues. Yeah. And it really helps them, whether they believe it's going to help them and it helps them, or it's really just, the Epsom salt, the magnesium, the weightlessness, the low stimulus to your brain. Your brain knows what to do to heal your body when you're not stressed and all that. Whatever it is, that was one of the reasons why we pretty much didn't close down for COVID times. Like I closed down while I wanted to re-slope the floors and build out another massager. But like I was in here seeing people on a one-on-one basis because I wanted to be safe still. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't really know what was going on. But I would have one person come in. I would just UV blast everything, spray everything down because we've got so many people that were emailing and calling.
Like, we need this.
Yeah, like I can't, my back, my, whatever, it's just stress even, the people needed it. So I get in that just because, especially St. George, I used to have a production facility up there, and my little brother lived up there for a while, so I know what you're talking about. But I would say way more, especially with your fire and ice room, just getting into the physical benefits of just like,
and honestly, like I think there's it's crazy with COVID because the first place that you should keep open is a place where people are getting more healthy.
Totally.
Like if you're hitting a sauna, if you're hitting cryo, if you're getting in a float tank, if you're like trying to get into a better, you call that like what, preventative wellness or something? It's just wellness. It's just like, no, you want to be well. If you want to be well, don't close down the wellness places. Right. Don't close down where people are becoming healthier, right? Like, because if you're coming in, if you're isolated, if you're cut off from human touch, if you're cut off from sunlight, if you're, eating a poor diet, all those things, you're compromised immunely, so then the virus is going to be actually probably worse if you get it, right? Yeah. You're going to have like a worse sort of reaction most likely. I'm just saying it's a complex issue.
Sure, yeah.
But it's hard. And that's one thing about Utah that I do appreciate was that during the pandemic, we were able to stay open, and we opened during the pandemic. We opened on October 2020, so it's like very much in the height of COVID. Yeah. And we were going to do a launch party, and then that's like when the day we were going to do that, like when our first day, like launch party, it was like governor mandate, mask mandate, and like no crowds and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So kind of busted our bubble. We had to wait for a while to be able to gather and do that and that celebration. But it's crazy. But it's fun to be part of the shift is kind of how I see it in Utah, at least. Like I feel like there's a shift happening. Mm-hmm. Like you can just feel it. Like it depends on like what part of Utah you're in, kind of too, because the more rural areas it's kind of less that way, and the more urban areas you can kind of feel like it's a different thing. Salt Lake City is a totally different place than what it used to be, and there's been a few catalysts over the last couple decades that have really haven't fared well for like overall for the Mormon church, I guess. And so it's, as far as like members starting to see issues. Sure. And very first episode of this podcast, I just had to address the elephant in the room because I grew up Mormon. I grew up in a fundamentalist Mormon community, actually. Yeah. So I have like 23 siblings.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So anyways, the elephant in the room is like, what are we talking about here? Like, what is this Mormonism? So I did a podcast with a guy named Jeremy Reynolds on that first episode, which was Really cool to be able to talk to him. He wrote a document in 2013 that I found in 2013, and that led to me just like checking out of that whole that cultural sort of narrative around Mormonism. And it wasn't because, I mean, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. So it wasn't like an easy thing to do. And it's not to say, like, obviously I have so much, love and respect for a lot of what's happening, what the intent is behind, those communities. Like, it's about bringing love into the world is how they see it,
Sure.
And so there's a lot of that I respect. But yeah, when you're taking it at face value, and he just breaks down in this document every single thing that's questionable about the whole narrative around Mormonism, and it's just one specific example, but you could do this with most, I think, organized religions if you're part of something that's very institutionalized, like the Catholic Church or the Mormon Church. That's just like some of the wealthiest organizations in the world. Mormon Church has $100 billion under management, and that doesn't count like their assets of physical property. It's just everywhere.
Damn.
They're like the wealthiest. They might be the wealthiest religion.
And you just dipped on them?
Well, I wasn't even part of I wasn't even part of the LDS Church. I was part of an offshoot group that was kind of like siloed in a little community in Colorado City.
Yeah.
But anyways, not to get on the Mormon tangent, I was just saying it's interesting to feel the kind of collective shift that's occurring.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of baby steps right now. And St. George is trying to like figure out so there's some people there. There's a community there who are trying to figure out like, what's this place if we're not going to church all the time, Like, and how do we find meaning and community? What does that look like post being Mormon, right? Or being LDS or post religion? Because like so many people are going through that transition. Like I'm using Utah as an example because that's where I'm from.
Yeah, sure.
But this scales out to like the world,
Totally.
Yep. And yeah, it's interesting because I find like to being in the float industry, you're kind of at the front line of that, of like the meaning crisis,
where
people are coming in with like depression and anxiety, and we have the ability to offer ketamine therapy, which is we're so lucky to be able to do that. We have a clinic that comes in and offers it, and they just do an amazing job. But ketamine infusions can stop suicidal ideation in just like a single treatment.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Yeah,
I'll definitely be asking you about some of that stuff, because we've had somebody come in here that can do that kind of stuff, and I'm just like, it seems a little sketchy. I mean, just because I've had enough people have kind of crazy experiences on psychedelics or edibles, even like to where you gotta like walk them through the shower and stuff.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, they come out just completely covered in salt water. But anyways, just experiences like that. And with ketamine therapy, I definitely was just, my mind kind of goes to, I see all the potential, and I would definitely be a proponent for sure to send someone somewhere. But doing it in the facility, I was just like, I wanted to ask you a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I would say this room, or not a float room. So like we're not giving people ketamine and having them float.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that I'm completely opposed to, because I've experienced it on low doses myself, and it's like so incredible. Like, it's very beneficial, but obviously from a liability perspective, and like you just said, you don't want somebody being completely blasted in a float tank. That's not safe.
Yeah.
And the only deaths that have happened in float tanks, I think, have been ketamine related. Like, it's not something to play with or to joke about. If you disassociate and you somehow get flipped over in the water, like, you're gonna die. It's not a good idea. But in a safe setting, like in a room like this, where you've got a nice peaceful atmosphere and setting, in a comfortable like layback chair, then you can have a clinician come in with and do the infusion and facilitate that journey. So they play like an interesting role, right? Because they went through medical, like they're medical professionals, right? They have to be in order to do it legally. So the clinic has to be the ones administering it. Obviously, we're not really making any money on it. We're not, they're just there because we think it's a good idea. And it's like, we love what you guys are doing. Come do it here, please, and give our members a good deal. Yeah. That's like the whole shindig, right?
And you guys are doing that at your facility though now?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But we do it in our massage room. So what we do is it used to be once a week. We've kind of changed the cadence back and forth, but we just sort of move the tables to the side and put them behind, like, we partition them off with like one of those room dividers or whatever. And then, set it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason we want it to be at True North is because you can float prior to the experience. So you go in for your float. We do 90 minutes. used to do 60, and I just 90 is like was our number one request, was more time.
Yeah.
So, and I find 90 to be like the perfect sweet spot for myself. But you do a 90-minute float, and then you can go straight into your ketamine infusion after that. So you're already in this like post-float glow experience. You know, your stress is kind of blown off, right? And you're in a, like, a lot of people are going into that with some anxiety, right? Like when they're thinking about doing ketamine therapy, they're nervous because these people usually have anxiety to begin with. And then they're trying a new experience, probably for the first time. That could sound scary, right? It's like, oh, it could be psychedelic. I don't know what it's going to be like. It could be hard. So having the float beforehand puts people in a way better space.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep.
Yeah. So I think based on like what you've got happening here already, it's super synergistic. I think it could be a real, if you found the right people to come in and offer it, and under their licensing and insurance and everything, right? So that you're not taking on like the liability of any sort of malpractice, and make sure that they're, you know, that you feel comfortable and trust them, and that they have, for me, like we got lucky. We met the Allens, who run Satori Health and Wellness and in St. George, and they're just really good people, and you know, they make their own, you know, they make money like at the hospital as anesthesiologists. So it's like, this is a passion project where they're like, people need this. People were coming to them who were suicidal and super mega depressed, and like, hey, I've heard about ketamine. Can you help me figure out how to get that treatment? And so they started this kind of clinic in the back of an office, and then it grew into like a full-on thing.
Named Satori, then like a Mormon, like all surrounded.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, sure. But dude, I was thinking, when you talk about what little time I spent in St. George, really, just you guys are just surrounded by nature. Like, what a beautiful.
So good.
When I first met you, and that's where you're up, I'm just like, God, I can just imagine, you know, just you guys. It's nature, like it's
powerful nature. That's my favorite thing about St. George, Southern Utah. Yeah. It's like you got the mountains, you got Zions. It's just like sacred land. It's gorgeous. If you get back out there, did I tell you about the hike that I don't want to say it on the podcast because I don't want to make it crowded. Sure. But there's a hike that you got to do out there that's really just for me life-changing, like beautiful. You did tell me. We brought kids out and stuff, and we're just like, it was kind of a, you know, we had our simple little stuff all planned out and all that stuff. So next, I was telling you, and I'm sure I mean it, like next time I go out there, for sure I'll be hitting you up. I'm sure I'll get to stop by. But we had I think we had 5 kids with us on that trip. Wow. So it was like, I want to come by, but we need to beeline home right now. How many kids do you have? I met your son, right, yesterday? Yep, I have 2 kids. Okay. And then my no, we had 4 kids with us, not 5. The girl that I have my son with, she has 2 other kids. Okay, gotcha. So your son's relatively new to life, new to the world, and we don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to make this quick. But I'm curious, obviously, the fact that you have children informs me a little bit about your stance on children. But like, this is something that I'm thinking about a lot because I'm turning 30, and I'm in a position right now, this new decade kind of coming up on me, and I'm looking down the road at the world and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know, like, should I have kids, right? Like, and a lot of people my age, I think, are going through this sort of back and forth. Mm-hmm. So what was it that, you know, felt right to, like, what's your opinion? What's your view on children and like being a dad? It's todo cambia in Spanish, like everything changes, like what we were talking about earlier. Todo cambia changes for sure. It can be like, oh my gosh, and this is amazing. But for sure, right now with my son, it's just my daughter's 15, so that was a long time ago. She was like this, but it reminds me of that, and my daughter still reminds me of the unconditional love thing. Like what I want to practice, not to just something that's come from my body that I created, but the unconditional love thing. But my son right now is in so much wonder, and just reminding me to stay in wonder. You know, I'm able to be a lot more present with him than I was with my daughter 15 years ago. I was like scrambling, trying to figure things out, all of that. And so just being present with him, but the reminder of just that wonder, like stay in wonder, look at things through the eyes of a child every once in a while. And the unconditional love, it's definitely, it's for sure work. I don't mind calling it work. It's work for sure. Hard, yeah. Yeah, but it's just so amazing. And scary too. Like, I can imagine. I mean, because you know you've got this piece of your heart on the outside now that you've got to like worry about and look out for, and you know, yeah, for me, like I spend probably way too much time, more time than I should, thinking about like a bigger picture,
Yeah.
and that can get terrifying. So it's like, you know, it can for me, that's kind of the teeter totter, the seesaw that I'm on. It's just like one day it's like, oh my God, you know, look at the problem, right? Like look at what we're up against. Look at the world. Like look at what world are in 2050 and 2060. Like what world would my children be inheriting? You know, what world would they be coming into? And so that's why I'm trying to imagine the more beautiful world, right? So that I can feel like super confident and stoked about bringing them into the world. But then who's going to create that world if not for the youth, right? Like not the new energy, the neuroplasticity, the pure wonder, creativeness, the creativity that comes with that new generation.
Yeah. And it is just still remembering, I think it is whatever you make it. Like my heaven on earth could be your hell pretty easily. But, you know, because I think my parents were a little bit worried about the world they were bringing their kids into, you know, all of that. I think that'll be the case for a long time. Like it's definitely, I just try to be a good example to my kids but really, I think it's a reminder quite often of like, you know, just because this thing came from my body, like that love, unconditional love, just because this person doesn't mean I can't have the same kind of looking at them the same way if I want to.
Yeah, of course. You know? Yeah. No. And if you come into presence, you kind of do.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Like as soon as you are in a state of presence and it's just like, and you're in that wonder, you're like, it's kind of, this is like a whole nother universe, a world
totally
coming into contact with my world. And like anything that bothers me about them, like let's say they litter, whatever, then it's like there's an environment that shaped that person, right? Yeah. And just like me. So
just like me.
Yeah.
Dude, that's so powerful. You just said that right now, like just like me.
Yeah.
Watching things in a flow practice of like you know, or like one thing I wanted to strengthen that muscle is whenever I would just be like, that person's like annoying, I would say just like me afterwards.
Yeah.
And you just said that right now, like that's such a freaking game changer, dude.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, totally. Well, I know you've got you're a busy guy. You use this space. You got some massages happening. So let's wrap it. Is there anything else you want to add? I mean, floatstate.com if anyone wants to check out Float State. You don't have to live in Corona. It's a great reason to come visit Southern California.
Yeah.
Just for like a self-care weekend.
Yeah. No, this is awesome. I'm so glad I was able to get to do this with you. Like, thank you very much for having me.
No, dude, thank you. We're here in your beautiful space. Thanks for not just welcoming us in and providing the best float tanks possible to float in and the environment to float in, but for getting us water. Like the staff hooked us up with like filling up the van with water and shit. Like we're recharged. So I'm super stoked that we got to make it in.
Yeah, we just tell them definitely just be useful. Go be useful to Christian. Totally.
You guys, I mean, you got the kombucha on tap. Like you guys have checked literally all the boxes. So
it's nothing but love, dude.
Yeah,
it
much
really,
love. Yeah, I appreciate it, man.
Likewise.
Thanks.
Thank you.